Welcome back to the second round of shooting questions with Zev.
Thanks,
uh,
Steph.
Thanks for the last one that we had. That was super informative, and the feedback that I got was really a lot of really grateful people who learnt a lot from that last one. And I'm sure you've been busy with a lot of inquiries yourself on your end.
Yeah, look, awesome response to the last video we done with you, D. And it's great to get the information out to so many people like that. There's been nearly 200,000 hits on some of them videos from that chat that have gone out online. So that's a lot of people able to learn and see the other side of the coin and start to realize that there are more options there than the options that were offered. Just because the option isn't offered to us doesn't mean it's not there.
Mm-hmm.
It's where we try and help educate people and for them to learn. And look, to put it another way, if you come to my house, D, and I offered you a tea or a coffee, you now have the illusion of free choice. You can choose a tea or a coffee because that's what I've offered. But what if you wanted a whiskey or a glass of water? Where's your free choice then? I guarantee you in my house, there's always whiskey. I just wasn't offering it. Doesn't mean the option's not available. And this is how our government works. They tell you you can choose option A or B. You can have poison tea or poison coffee. Choose one. Go,
That's
no, I don't want option A or B. I want to explore the options C through Z. And they go, oh, we're not offering those. Just because they're not being offered doesn't mean they're not there available.
that's such a good analogy, Zev. Um, I think that's so important. People are aware of that we have to think outside the box. And it's not always what we're told or what we're given we have to accept.
So if you don't like the offer, don't accept it. Negotiate the terms, create your own options, and make a counter offer based on, well, what about this option? We weren't offering that. Well, that's all right. It's still a valid option. It's still a lawful or legal option that we can use. It's just not one that you've offered or provided us.
So I did put up a video to ask if people had specific questions bouncing on the last chat that we had. And there were quite a few questions, and I'm going to ask you the most relevant ones. We'll get into the first one. So, are council rates legal, and how would you suggest people deal with council fines?
Right, well, first of all, dealing with council, be very, very careful, guys, because they're renowned for being nasty. And they seem to have this messed up attitude of how dare you question our authority. It's an authority that they don't have under any legal entitlement. So let's just be clear and very quickly summarise on the councils. No, they are not government. According to our constitution, our so-called government, because I don't like calling them a government when they're not, our so-called government, attempted back in 1988 via a couple of referendums to amend the constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia, not the bullshit Australian constitution that we use for toilet paper, the actual real one being the constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia. They attempted a couple of referendums back in 88 to have local councils recognised as another tier of government or as local government. Now, the attempts to do so via referendum were shot down with an 80 to 90% no vote, indicating that we, the people, expressed our will and we did not want local councils being another tier of government. Now, let's bear in mind here that it's our politicians only have one job. That one job that the politicians and those in Parliament have is to represent the will of we, the people. That's it. That's their job description in one sentence. It's to represent the will of we, the people. Sadly, no politician has ever done so. So we have a bit of a problem there. The other side of it is after the referendum was shot down, see, according to our constitution, we only have three legitimate tiers of so-called government in Australia. That's the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. And under our separation of powers laws, which we talked about last time with the R versus Kirby and the ex parte Boilermakers Association case in the High Court in 1956, was about this. Now, the council aren't the executive, they cannot legislate, and they're not the courts of the judiciary. So the councils do not fit into any of those three tiers of so-called government. After the referendum was knocked down and we, the people, expressed our will for Parliament to honour and act upon, saying we don't want this, the states and territories from 89 onwards started passing unlawful legislative state acts and instruments such as local government acts, local state and environment planning acts, giving them all fancy terms to try and trick and deceive the people into thinking it was actually valid legislation, granting any of these local councils, which are really just a company or a business, any sort of authority or governmental rights. Now, that is in direct breach and violation with our Constitution, with the highest of Commonwealth law that we have in Australia is our Constitution, the real one. So they've passed state laws that are in conflict with Commonwealth law, they're invalid. Section 109 of our Constitution applies, which states that when the laws of a state are in conflict with that of the Commonwealth, the latter shall prevail and the former shall, to the extent of its inconsistency, be invalid. That's it. That's section 109 of our Constitution, one sentence, and it invalidates the state law if it's in conflict. Now, due to the fact that the Constitution does not recognise a fourth tier of government or local councils in any legislative, executive or judicial capacity, they therefore cannot claim to be being the government. And because it's unconstitutional, it's therefore unlawful. We've got state law in conflict with the Constitution. 109 applies. And again, our Queensland Rail case we discussed last time also applies with the councils because they're also considered a trading corporation courtesy of their ABNs and ACNs, in which case, again, our Queensland Rail case of the High Court on the 8th of April 2015 applies with our councils as to how to verify that. What I advise a lot of people do with the councils is, look, until you get your head around this a bit better, don't refuse or stop paying the rates. You tell them, we conditionally accept your offer and we'll keep doing a payment plan, but as a sign of good faith and honour, just to verify that I'm doing the right thing here, can you please provide the following reasonable items of requested evidentiary documentation supporting and verifying your claim and or positional standing? And we ask the council to make good of their claim. Again, where people go wrong here, D, is they make the claim. You've got no authority. I'm a living man. You can't do that. We're making claims. We're not asking questions. And we're not asking the other party who made the claim to provide proof of that claim. So we've got to do it with questions. Can you please provide? We here now request or demand the following items of evidentiary documentation. So you can remind them about the referendum that was shot down. You can ask for copies of their oath of office and details provided as to when and where that was gazetted in the Government Gazette. They can't swear allegiance to a foreign power. That's prohibited, again, in our Constitution. And where are they all swearing their fealty and allegiance to? A fake, fictitious corporate king or queen, a Queen of Australia or King of Australia. Their oaths aren't correct. They're supposed to include heirs and successors, but they don't, in which case they need to take a new oath. As we don't have the title of a Queen of Australia or a King of Australia, where is that coming from? They're swearing their fealty or allegiance to. It's a foreign power. And we in Australia, even our government, under the Royal Styles and Titles Act of 1953, we lack the authority to grant or give the King or the Queen a new title. Mm-hmm. Therefore, this corporate King or Queen of Australia, whatever they're operating under, also in accordance with the Royal Styles and Titles Act, that King of Australia, which is now thanks to Charles or the Queen, they can't, any of their agents, such as governing and attorney generals, passing royal assent. They're not royal. They lack the authority under this fictitious entity, which is also not royal, to grant royal assent. It's because they lack the land seals and titles in accordance with our Royal Styles and Titles Act to have the authority to grant the King or Queen a new title, or to create this entity and have us thinking that it's somehow representative of the Crown when it's not. At the end of the day, it's fraud. So there's a lot of other stuff you can do with the councils there, but that's a very short thing on they're not legally or lawfully recognised by the Constitution, and we've had 2 referendums to attempt to change that, both of which were shot down. So if the council is an unconstitutional entity, they're not a legal or lawful entity. They are quite literally, by definition, a trading company or corporation.
And have you ever seen, Zev, if someone who knows all this information and has fought back, have you seen them succeed? Is it possible?
I've got a client in town. I can't speak too much on this one because it's in court, but I've got a client in another state who has put all this through, and it's been not into court, but to the courthouse for mediation. And what come from that mediation is he put in a notice of demand for better and further particulars, requesting a lot of this evidence. Of course, the council said we're not providing it because they can't. Mediation at the courthouse, it was in a separate room, like not in the courtroom. The court have demanded that the council provide this information because they said he's raised some valid points. Now, I've also been hearing, which I'm waiting to have verified, there's an area in northern Tasmania where the council, so many people challenged them on these grounds, they've actually disbanded the council. They don't have one there at the moment.
Wow.
So if enough people are doing this, then yeah, we can make a difference. And I talk about this a lot. Everyone goes, but it's just me. I'm too small to make a difference. Try sleeping with a mosquito in your room. Just one mosquito for the night. It's tiny. How much of a difference does that make? Can you imagine there's 1,000 mosquitoes in the room? Where are the mosquitoes? And we're just going to harass them with all of these questions until they stand down or they stop attempting to impose their unlawful authority, which they have no source of power to derive from, over we the people.
Yeah, I love that metaphor. You always have really good ways of helping us see our power that we have. And the thing with councils is they're just another means of people exploiting, people. And I know, and where I live, I recently heard that now there's some sort of a $12,000 fee that's required, that's going to have to be paid when people build new houses, for the council, like an extra $12,000 on your home loan mortgage, which is absolutely through the roof because of what's happening with inflation. And they're getting away with this, and I think people should fight back because it is a fraud. It's unlawful, as you explained.
You have to ask them to please explain, one, your source of authority or head of power or authority, where these powers and authorities you're claiming to have come from, and how do they get applied to me or over me without my consent? Yeah, do we ask under Australian consumer laws, it's prohibited to request payment for unsolicited goods and services. None of us went to the council and said, oh, mate, we'd like to employ you guys so you can put us over a barrel and charge us a fortune for all this shit that we didn't need, want, nor ask for. Said no one ever. So this is another point there, that they're requesting payment for unsolicited goods and services. And why aren't we doing the same to the council? People having issues, I tell everybody, first of all, get your trespass signs up, guys. That's important. They work. They're ratified by numerous High Court case laws and precedents. So trespass is, by definition of the High Court, a criminal offence. When the council say, oh, we want to come out in your property and inspect, do the same. Look, we're all equal before the law. Why aren't we doing the same thing to them they do to us? Here's an entry application form and you must pay the processing fee. The processing fee is in no way indicative of whether or not your application will be approved. If you want to build a shed in your backyard there, D, you're supposed to go to the council and put in a DA application for approval to build a frigging shed. Yeah? And you have to pay the application fee. The application fee is non-negotiable, non-refundable, and should your application be unsuccessful, you don't get the application fee back because it's purely a processing fee. It doesn't determine the outcome of the application. So if this is all above board and lawful and we're all equal before the law, why aren't we doing this to the councils? So make up your own entry application form, let them know that trespass applies and that no entry application form will be even looked at until the processing fee has been received and processed. Now, if you're going to do this, guys, be sensible. Don't go putting $1 million processing fee on it. Go like, $1,000 or 10 grand or something somewhat bloody reasonable to cover you for your time to have a look at the application. You can always go through and go, no, you haven't crossed a T or for whatever reason. You can state in your entry application form that if it's denied, that you're not compelled to disclose the reason, just as the council won't tell you why your DA for your shed wasn't approved, D. So you put all this into your paperwork and you send that out to them. And until such time as they fill out your entry application form, and they do so, and then they'll say, well, it's council land, we have to come on and have a look. Well, how did I buy it if it's your land? If the council are claiming, again, they've made the claim, provide the proof. Show me the bill of sale or the exchange of title. When and where did the council purchase that land for you to have a claim over it?
Exactly.
Show me the evidence.
For those who are wanting to take on councils, you can, and they don't have the knowledge that you have, obviously, can they reach out to you for that help?
Yeah, look, get in touch with us via the website at warriorlaw.com. And one of the other great resources for stuff on council is Darren Dixon's website, constitutionwatch.com. He's done a lot of research and FOIs and stuff. It's a great resource website. I caught up with Darren last week. I said, man, I spend hours on his website sometimes doing my research, looking for that, because it's full of references. And he's done a nice big one showing how the council are not and cannot be in service to or of the Crown, which means they're not government. So there's a load of info out there for people. Just put it together in the right way. Tread lightly with the council, and every case with the council is different and depends on how far down the track it is. If the council have already got default judgments and looking at seizures and warrants to seize property and stuff, you're a bit late for going down some of these roads to question it. You'll have to fly this through the courts.
Yeah.
It's going to work very differently for people. So, look, again, it's a very individualized thing as to where people are at. But if you respond straight away and get onto these thieving pricks early on in the piece, it'll make a big, big difference. Same with any legal matter. Don't bury your head in the sand. Don't ignore it. Deal with it straight away.
Yeah.
The sooner you deal with it, the better. Well, with the exception of traffic and COVID fines, because you want to push them past the 12 months for charges so our statute of limitations kicks in.
Yeah, that's good to know. So I think that is great information in relation to councils. So thanks for covering all of that. We'll go to the next question. So the information you provided in the previous video was great in relation to tolls. I know a lot of people really dislike tolls, and I think more and more are starting to wake up and realize just how fraudulent they are. They're not paying them, but they're also being continually harassed by the companies. You know, they send so many letters, especially if you're someone who's going to work every day and using tolls every day, and you're getting a letter for every single toll that you pass. I mean, I get letters all the time as well. Is there a way to kind of stop being harassed by the toll companies, or what?
Well, look, the easiest, most obvious solution is don't use the bloody tolls. Drive around them. I mean, I know here in Victoria, I mean, I use them and refuse to pay for them, but that's another thing to do so. There's often roadworks and stuff on them. You think it's going to be quicker to go up the toll road, and it actually takes longer because it's congested. There's roadworks, there's lanes down. It's not always the quickest, most direct route. And again, why are we paying for something we've already paid for the use of? This is the whole argument with tolls. In New South Wales, your fuel levy covers that. The tax we pay on petrol is supposed to cover our use of that. You know, these are all, we talked about some of this last time too, about the tolls there. 1890 Partnership Act. If you were born here, you hold a single share in the Commonwealth in accordance with the 1890 Partnership Act. That share you hold in the Commonwealth allows you to make the most of your shareholder benefits, rights, and privileges by making use of that which you hold a share in. And as a shareholder, why were we not consulted about the sale or leasing of Commonwealth property?
Exactly.
And has anyone followed the money and the list of companies who supposedly own or lease these tolls? They're not Australian companies. So why are we paying a foreign power for use of something that we, the people, have already paid for the use of, already have rights, benefits, and privileges to make every available use of, rather than paying some overseas company who's done some dodgy deal without the people and the Commonwealth's consent to do so, to try and attempt to get us to pay for something we've already paid for, already have the rights, benefits, and privileges to make use of.
I don't mind if they're continually sending me their letters. I just ignore them or put them in my fireplace over here. Even if they can turn around and say, well, you should have challenged it. Could they? Is that?
You can turn around and say that, but like if you're dealing with revenue or Vic fines or whatever, the question to ask them is, what order or judgment are you planning on enforcing this infringement on in the absence of a conviction? There's been no charges laid and no court date yet. What happened to we're all innocent until proven otherwise? Oh, we had 28 days to go to court. Yeah, well, you guys had 12 months to press charges. You've got your time frame to prosecute now. and we're at the point where proceedings cannot commence, in which case you cannot attain a guilty verdict. So I remain innocent by default.
Mm. Yeah. And when these, tolls go to an alleged debt with SPER or Revenue New South Wales or Fines Victoria or other so-called government state collection corporations, are there things that you can do then?
Well, there are. You can always ask them to send it back to the issuing authority so it can be challenged in court. So you only had 28 days. Well, I've only just received it.
Mm.
How much shit gets lost in the mail and always has done.
Mm.
And for them, they go, we sent it to you via the mail. Yeah, well, that's nice, mate, but I don't have it. I've got nothing. Can you send me proof? I mean, I get cheeky and send them a photo of my hand holding nothing and go, look, here's your photographic evidence. I don't have it. Here's a photo of my empty hand, not holding the documents that you're saying you've sent me. You can be a bit cheeky about it, but it often won't get anywhere. So when you're dealing with these guys, just to ask them what judgment, order, or conviction are they relying upon for the act of enforcement? You're enforcing a claim or an allegation in the absence of a conviction or a guilty verdict.
Mm.
What laws and authority you're relying upon that allows you to do so? We have numerous laws that protect us from that across the country. Victoria is one of the few that still recognise the Imperial Applications Act of 1980, which Section 8, Paragraph 12 says fines and forfeitures are deemed null, void and illegal without a conviction.
Mm.
There are elements of our Commonwealth Crimes Act in the latter end of Section 15, which is a rather large section, says the same. They can't enforce these fines and indentures, etc., in the absence of a guilty verdict or a conviction.
Mm.
And SPER or Revenue New South Wales or Fines Victoria are attempting to punish you by way of removing licence or rego for an unpaid fine. It's an allegation that is yet to be proven and you're yet to be charged with it.
Mm.
So how are you enforcing something that has no guilty verdict or conviction? I say, well, under the Fines Act, we're allowed to do this and that. Well, that's fine. And you're welcome to attempt to do all of that. But what you're doing is unlawful. It is in breach of procedural fairness and in breach of judicial process. You cannot enforce something without a conviction or a guilty verdict.
Mm.
I say, well, you can't go to court anymore. Your time's expired. And you call them after 12 months. Well, you guys can't go to court either. You need to drop your claim. Proof of claim is what it comes back to. I can't just send you an infringement and say, all right, D, I reckon you did this, so you owe me $200 now, please pay. You'd laugh your ass off at me. Why are these bastards any different?
Yeah, exactly. And when the debt collectors, because they're essentially buying the debt.
Well, they don't always buy it. Sometimes they are acting on behalf of with an authority to act. So if you do have to deal with debt collectors, one of the best questions to ask them, and they don't like answering it, is for them to provide either a copy of their third-party agreement, which verifies their authority to act, because they're a third-party interloper, or ask them if they can provide a copy of your deed of assignment. Now, the deed of assignment will have the price that they purchased the debt for on it. So quite often these companies will say, we're not going to give you a deed of assignment, but we can give you a copy of the notice of assignment, which doesn't disclose the amount they purchased the debt for. Now, if people want to look this up, you can fact check me, do your own homework on this one, guys. Majority of bad debts are purchased by debt collection companies for 10 cents or less on the dollar. So let's say you had a bad debt with me for 100 grand and I've written it off and sold it to a debt collector. They're probably only going to pay 3 to 10 grand for that $100,000 debt. And then they make their money by chasing you up for the full amount.
Yeah, wow. That's really good to know.
That's how they operate. So, yeah, there is that side of it to deal with these debt collection companies to, mate, I can't do business with you as we don't have a contract and I don't know you. We've got no business or commercial transactions that I'm aware of, which also requires my consent, of course, under a contract. Oh, we've purchased the contract. Oh, as a third-party interloper, thanks. You've cleared the debt for me with you, and you now owe it to us. All right. So that we can make a suitable offer of settlement for you. How much did you purchase the debt for? Oh, we're not willing to disclose that. Well, until you're willing to disclose the amount and show proof of via evidentiary documentation, which if this goes to court, we'll be requesting copies of anyway, That you might owe someone $30,000 debt, but it's been purchased for $2 or $3,000 by the other company. So they're not out of pocket. You give them the $3,000. They only have the equity in what they've paid for it. If you had a bad debt with someone else, yeah, and I purchased that debt, let's say you had a $50,000 debt, for example, D, and I purchased that debt as a debt collector for $4,000 or $5,000. I can't claim the full amount. I have no equity there. I can claim that I've put $4,000 or $5,000 in, and I need at least that back. The bonus for you is you get to write off a $50,000 debt and only pay $5,000 to have it go away, because that's all it's costing. I'm not out of pocket the $50,000 on the debt. I'm only out of pocket what I purchased on it. So that's all I'm entitled to be able to claim. And even then, it's a slippery slope because I'm a third party. I'm not named in the contract. I'm not joined to it properly. That's why they need third-party agreements and deeds of assignment to be able to join these other mobs to it. They don't have that. They have no authority to act.
Yeah. And is there some sort of breach of your privacy that this, you were dealing with New South Wales roads or whatever, and then they've passed on your information to this other foreign company and you never...
It largely depends on the contract or the obligations or deal agreement you have with the original entity that says that you owe the money. When they on-sell it, depends on what you've agreed to or what was implied in contract or that you've agreed to there for them to have to do that or not. So read the fine print as always.
Good to know. Okay, I think we've covered that one. That's really, really good info. Thank you, Zev. There was a question about people who do travel in vans, and as you know, they're often harassed for sleeping in their vans or camping in their vehicles in non designated areas. Is there some advice you can give to these people?
Yeah, look, first of all, don't be a dick. That's the first rule of doing that. I've traveled a lot. I've had a van that I've traveled in. I'd park wherever and sleep wherever and didn't worry about too much stuff. But if you know there are areas where you are that are heavily patrolled, where they do harass people for that, don't fucking park there. That's the first thing. If you're not ready to deal with this, don't push it. If you're not looking for a fight, you don't want to be battling these idiots, don't push the point. There are plenty of places that you can go and do that where you won't be harassed. Don't stay in the same spot for a long time unless you're well and truly off the beaten track. Yep, ask for proof of their claim of authority on the land that they're telling you that you can't be parked on. Is it public land or not? Is it Crown land? Oh, it belongs to the council. Show me the proof. When did the council acquire the land? Can I see the bill of sale or the exchange of title that has the council's name on it saying this is your land and that you're authorised to tell me that I cannot be here? It's open to the public, is it not? Am I not the public? Oh, but you can't sleep here. So the other one I used to do, if I pulled up somewhere at a nice beach when I was travelling, D, and I didn't even drink at the time, I'd fish out from one of the bins or whatever around the area, or pinch them off a mate, a half a dozen empty beers. And I just have a half a dozen empty beer bottles sitting in the footwell in the passenger seat. And if police or ranger ever houses me, I just say, mate, I've had a big blue with the missus. I'll come down to the beach to clear me head. I can't drive, point at the 6 empties, or are you instructing me to move my vehicle while I'm under the influence? Massive liability for them. What can they do? Yeah, mate, I've come down here. I've had a few beers sitting here to clear me head. I wasn't right to drive. I don't believe I am yet either. As soon as I'm right to drive, yeah, I'll bugger off and head home. What can they say or do? They have a duty of care. You're laying a trap for them to direct you to move. Well, mate, I could still be under the influence. I'm not feeling right to move the car yet. You can't be drinking, mate. I was drinking in my van. Did you see? You just admitted to it. Well, all right, you can write me a ticket if you like, but I'm going to challenge it too. There are a lot of ways of getting around that. I mean, we have the right to travel from point A to point B.
Yeah.
We have certain inalienable rights. Now, one of the other nice ones is a very old case from 1796 called Cruden versus Neal, Cauden versus Neal, Neale. Now, the big takeout from that case was the judge in that case determined that man is not bound to any laws except for the laws of nature. And he cannot be bound to any construct or institution of his fellow man without his consent. And it's a very true point. The only laws that we are absolutely bound by, that we cannot do anything about, we have no governance or authority over, are the laws of God or nature, our ecclesiastical divine natural law. We are absolutely governed by that, whether we like it or not, because we're all creatures of nature, creatures of God, however you want to word that. That's what we come back to our hierarchy. God created man, man created government. That which we created cannot have authority over us. And the same as that which God or nature created cannot have authority over God or nature, just like we don't have authority over God or nature, being that's where we're created from. And then man created government. So how does that which we created have authority over us? It can't. It's not how it works.
Yeah.
That's our simple one for guys like in the van life thing too. Don't push the point. Be clever about it, guys, if you're going to be doing that. Don't park in the same spot all the time if you know the rangers are coming and hassling you there. And if you want to beat the tickets and stuff in there, make sure that you're in a spot where you can take photos where signs are obscured or you didn't know. It's not the whole area is, well, where does it say that, mate? Like some of these remote beaches, we've been hustled out for camping on the beach for the night, but there's not a single sign anywhere that says you can't. How are we supposed to know? And in some areas where people do that a lot, these signs are mysteriously vanish and fall over and get taken down. So there's no signage to warn people. So if you're going to do that with the van life, look, yeah, be careful about it. And look, if you're in, which some people are van life by choice, some are by extreme hardship because they've lost everything and that's all they've got left. It'd be most unscrupulous to pick on someone who's experienced, especially after COVID and floods and fires the last couple of years. If that's all they've got, well, where else can they go? I mean, we have a duty of care to look out for our vulnerable members of the community, not to persecute them and make things harder.
Yeah, exactly.
It speaks volume to the type of character someone has who's attempting to persecute someone who's living in a van, either by choice or by hardship, to make things even harder for them is a pretty low act in itself. And it's like, well, thank you for using your discretionary powers. I'll move the van. Or you can claim your rights to be there, but then you need to know what you're doing if you're going to deal with it, because most council workers are not savvy with the law. They're not trained in that. They don't care. They just like, mate, we don't care about your common law argument. Here's your ticket.
Yeah.
See, and if you're dealing with arrogance, well, fine, take them to court and beat them that way based on the lack of jurisdiction authority that the council have. They're not the judiciary. They have no business issuing fines. And they can't enforce them because, again, they're not the judiciary. And where's the guilty verdict or the conviction for the act of enforcement? And where does their authority come from to tell you that in the first place?
Really important that people who are doing this are aware of all of that so they can protect themselves, or if anything was to happen, they know how to deal with it.
If the council's saying, look, we're authorised to do this, well, mate, I'm not questioning your authority. I'm sure you have these magical, mythical powers of authority from some magical place that's not legal because you're in conflict with the Constitution. But let's say for a minute that these magical, mythical powers of authority you're claiming to have are legitimate. How do they apply over me when I haven't consented or agreed to that? So are you saying I don't have the, mate, you can have whatever authority you like, but it's not getting applied on or over me because I haven't agreed or consented to that. So you can claim whatever the fuck you like, doesn't matter. But that authority will not be transmitted over or on top of me or my inalienable rights. That you have no authority to do. I don't care where your magical, mythical, so-called powers are coming from. Where do you get the right to impose that on another living being? They don't. They don't have that power or right. No one does.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks, Zev. I think one of the most common questions I get from everyone who are on this path and this journey is, how do I get out of the system? What's the step-by-step process? What do I need to do first? Do I need to do the UCC, the PA, the PMA? Do I do trusts? Or does it depend on the level of knowledge that path that they decide to take? What do you recommend for people looking to get out of the system?
To get out of the system, a lot of people come to us saying, I want to live and be in the private. And I want to get out of the system and I want to be in the private. Well, in order to do that properly, it takes a mountain of resources, because if you go to the shops, you're in the public. You go to the supermarket, you're in the public. If you're connected to power or water or gas, you're dealing with the public. Yeah. Most people's interactions are with some sort of public entity. So if you're going to be in the private, you need to have your own food, your own power supply. You might require your own medical and hospital as well. It's all private too. There's a lot to factor in to go 100% private. You need to be able to resource that with your own food, your energy, fuel, water, your food and all your day-to-day things. Where do you acquire that from in the private? There has to be, sadly, the way society's set up, unless you've got a whole community like a village that's set up like that, you can do that. You're still going to have trade and stuff with the public in some way to bring your goods and services in that you require. So it's very, very difficult to operate solely and entirely in the private. You can have some of your business entities set up that way to operate more privately. But you need to be very careful we don't mix that with the public. So if the public come to you with, your private association or a PMA, they need to become a member to access your services, and then you're no longer dealing with the public. But you have to transition those that you're engaging in commerce with into the private in order to maintain that for all parties. It's a very tricky way. There's no easy step-by-step process of lodge your affidavit, file this document, serve that here, and then you're done. It doesn't work. It's not that easy and simple, or we'd all have done this 20 years ago. Again, we still need to be able to survive and participate in community and society, which is not ready to go private. No. So yes, we can protect some of our assets and our businesses, our earnings, our incomes, and all the rest of it via having some of that private. But we can't go 100% private unless you've got some serious resources to be able to do all your own food, fuel, energy, water, medical. What are you going to do for fire or ambos or security or police if required as well? Let's remember, guys, not all police are complete idiots. There are some good ones out there, and they do have a job to help people. They're not just out there writing fines and harassing people. There are some good cops out there. Well, some of them are first responders to accidents. So a little bit of credit where credit's due for some of these guys. And look, granted, as anyone that knows me will tell you, D, I'm not a fan of the police in any way, shape or form. But there are some good ones on the force that are good, honest people who are generally trying to make a difference and aren't interested in this tyranny and oppression aspect of hiding behind the uniform. Some of them have a decent heart. They're genuinely there to help. And again, sometimes the police are first responders to accidents and scenes. So, respect where it's, credit where it's due, I should say, for those doing that work. That's rough to be first responder to an accident. That's the question. And they have to deal with this, day to day. Having said that, yeah, there are some pretty nasty cops out there as well that I wouldn't piss on if they were on fire, but the good ones I'd happily help. Sadly, there's just not many of the good ones around for doing that. And look, to get out of the system, you have to go through the system. You've got to literally, if that's the system, we've got to pass through it and come out the other side. Yeah. Because I want them to recognize the fact that we've exited from their jurisdiction and system. We're no longer part of it, guys. Here's our exit form, so to speak. And there are a number of ways of going about doing that. The Commonwealth custodians, being a Commonwealth national instead of a citizen, is a great way. I'm a big fan of the UCC paperwork and doing it via uniform commercial codes, lodging a lien over the debtor, the straw man, the man of straw. We'll put a lien over that. That's another way of protecting us and having that all in the private. You've got revision and rescission of consent and rescission contracts to revoke any contracts and agreements. You can do your ecclesiastical deed polls and deeds of reassignment. I've got a friend who's done the office of the General Executor and he's taken on General Executor of his own estate. There are numerous ways of going about doing this, but for people watching, work with one of the avenues that makes sense to you. You've got to be able to comprehend it and go to the author of the documents you're relying upon. Don't get your paperwork off a mate who knew this guy, who met someone who saw a Zoom and contacted the guy. You're 5 or 6 steps removed down the chain. You're getting 5th or 6th hand information on how to apply the process. So find out whose paperwork it is you're doing and go to the author, because they're the ones who created the documents and know how to use them properly. They're the ones who'll steer you in the right direction to do that particular process that you're learning about, because they're the ones that wrote it. They're the ones that done the docs. So always go to the author of the documents, find out where they're from. Are these the originals? No, these are ones I've made myself. Where'd you get them from? Oh, I got them off this dude named Bob. All right, we're going to go and look up Bob, and we want to speak to him because he's the author. So yeah, for a step-by-step thing for people to do that, look, there's a lot to learn and there's many different aspects to cover in doing so. And there is no magic bullet here or quick fix. There's no website that has a short 10 or 15 bullet point layout of how to do that, because it's different for everyone. Depends on where you are. Are you wanting to exit state, Commonwealth, Australian, international? What is it exactly of the system you're trying to get out of? And should you require any medical, do you still want to be able to use your Medicare card? Or are you happy to pay for those services privately? And these are all things to be factored in. The system is not itself the issue, or for me, on my thoughts, D. It's these fucktards at the top that are running it and corrupting it, that have corrupted it so heavily. That's the problem. Yes, the system itself needs a bit of work, but it's the mongrels at the top who have corrupted it and messed with it so heavily. That's the problem.
We're fortunate enough to be able to remove ourselves from the things that we don't want to accept and allow, and keep ourselves involved in things that we're happy with, sort of thing.
You absolutely get a choice there. We have the right to choose who and where and how and why we contract. We don't have to accept every offer. We can just quite simply say, yep, no thanks. Or if you don't accept the offer, mate, instead of Medicare paying for your doctor's appointment, it's going to cost you $100. All right, here's your $100. I've paid for it. It's private. It's a private interaction then. It's not being subsidised by the public system.
Yeah.
And these are choices people need to look at if they're going to go solely private. You need to be well resourced to do so. You know, if you're broke ass, going private's not the easiest of things to do, because how are you going to resource it when there are no public or government subsidies or benefits for you?
Yeah.
It's when you're in the private, you cover it yourself. You need the resources to do so.
Yeah. Look, in an ideal fairy tale fantasy world, it would be amazing to be able to be fully functioning in the private and have everything you need there, not having to rely on the system or anyone for what you need. But reality is that we, for a very long time, have been very dependent on the government, and they've done a really good job at making us very needy of them. But the blessing in the last few years is we've realized that now, and people are doing things to change that, and it's going to take time to transition fully from the public to the private. And in that transition, we still need their services at times.
Well, look, it's not a matter of needing their service. It's a matter of, look, it's easier and more convenient and beneficial for me.
Yeah.
I'm taking my private hat off and I put my public hat on for, say, Medicare benefits as an example. Once I've done the doctor's appointment and the Medicare thing's all been put through, right, the public hat goes off, private hat goes back on.
Yeah.
You can play in both arenas, but just not at the same time.
Yeah.
So, you know, today I might be in the private. Tomorrow I've got doctor's appointments and other stuff on. No, I want to be in the public, because then it's paid for and covered. I don't have to shell out for it.
Yeah.
The day after, man, I'm going back into the private. As long as we don't mix them on the same matter, on the same issue, we're okay. We can do that. You can chop and change and shift your jurisdiction whenever we choose to, because it's our right to choose. It's our right of choice.
And for those who are wanting to transition from the public as a legal fiction person to being in the private as a living man or woman, what do you recommend they do? Or
First thing to do is start with an affidavit. And for you guys watching, don't do any of this stupid shit that I keep seeing. I've seen affidavits of truth, affidavits of freedom, affidavit of status. There's an affidavit of just about bloody everything. Now, just to correct this, guys, they are just affidavits. No affidavit of. The only affidavit of I've ever come across is an affidavit of service. That's for proof of receipt of service. If I went to court and said, no, Dee's got all the documents, I've given her my evidence, first question the court will ask is, do you have proof of receipt of service? Yes, I actually have an affidavit of service to verify that. So that's another way of getting around that one is a simple affidavit, and then you've got the question of where to lodge it. Do not go lodging the affidavit with every government department and every police station and courthouse in your state. you will get a knock on the door from mental health services if you go doing stupid shit like that. So pick your target where you need it to go for your matter, whether that be through Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Governor or Attorney General, the Chief Magistrate's Office. You've only got to get it in on the government records in one place, and then it's there, and any other so-called government department can locate it via that office. So you don't have to send it to all 27 ministers, 300 courthouses, the 87 cop shops in the area, and all the government ministers and departments. Because if they all talk to each other, they'll send mental health services out for you, especially if people are doing stupid shit like Alex's bullshit 100-page bloody affidavit. That will get mental health services called on you for anyone watching who's attempting to use that.
Because a lot of people woke up in the last few years about what's going on with the government and what the birth certificate really is. I know of many parents who are having children or offspring. They're not getting birth certificates for their offspring. So if they do decide to do that, then how can they function in society between the public and the private without a straw man? How can they use the benefits like Medicare? Like, what happens there? Is it bad for them not to get a birth certificate? But they get a passport.
It's an each their own. Look, there are more ways to attain a passport than via Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and Passport Office here in Australia. We've got worldcitizengov.org, which do a world passport, which is not from any one country. That world passport, these guys have been doing these since the 50s. And the reason they do them is based on the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights from 1948. And everyone watching goes, he's spooking the UN. No, the UN back then was not as corrupt as it is now. And actually, the way that was set up back then was done with far better intentions than what we've seen it digress to nowadays. So let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, because back then this was actually done for decent purposes. And we'll have a chat another night maybe about this history of the Declaration of Human Rights and the history that's never been told that Bob sings about with Haile Selassie in Ethiopia and what happened there. And for anyone watching who doesn't know about that side of history, look this shit up, guys. Mussolini did to Africa what Hitler did to Europe and what Stalin done to Russia, and it's not spoken about. And you've got to look at why and what happened with the Emperor of Ethiopia, one Haile Selassie, who was crowned as Earth's rightful ruler in the early 1930s. So this is a nice little patch of history for people to look up about how and why, all that came about, which stems back to there. So what was for doing passports and ID, look, the best way to do ID is an affidavit from the mother. Because, look, without people going, oh, what did he say? I'm not accusing anyone of being a tart or promiscuous, but sometimes paternity can be questionable. We don't always know who the father is. It's pretty hard not to know who the mother is. She's the one with the belly for 9 months. She's the one who actually goes through the act of childbirth. She's also the one breastfeeding. It's very easy to determine that's the mum. That is irrefutable to be able to, and for a mum to make an affidavit saying, well, I met my husband or my partner on this and that day. I fell pregnant around here and we gave birth at the Smith Street Hospital on this day and time to a living baby boy or whatever. That is very difficult evidence for anyone to dispute in order to help attain ID. My daughter, even with a birth certificate, we had a hard time getting her a learner's, because it's the only ID that she had. And the only reason she's got one is at the time of her birth, the mum and I weren't getting along very well, and the mum went and lodged a birth certificate against, without me wanting it done, for obvious, because I knew even back then, 18 years ago, what this was about. So that was not enough ID. And I said to my daughter, do a stat dec, and they said, we won't accept one. So I went down to the courthouse with my daughter and we filed an affidavit each, and I took them down to the RTA. And they accepted them as evidence and ID straight away because they cannot refuse an affidavit.
Yeah.
So there are ways around it. And you've got the worldcitizengov.org. They will actually issue a world birth certificate. Now, I haven't looked in for people worried about how is that traded on and where. They're not BDM. They're not births, deaths, and marriages. So I don't know. But you can get other ID documents off that worldcitizengov.org or worldcitizen.gov.org, whatever their site is. Look them up for a world passport, and then you've attained photo ID without the need of a birth certificate to get one.
Right. And so you don't need a birth certificate then to get Medicare and
Well,
license.
you need 100 points of ID. So you can start with something like this World Citizen Mob to be able to start to create some ID. You can have some affidavits drawn up by the mother and the father if he was a witness to the birth as well, stating what's occurred and that you're the parents and all the rest of it there. So there are ways of getting around that, to be able to do that and start to create a chain of evidence and some ID that we don't have through the usual channels.
Yeah. Yeah. See, people, they think that they can't function in society without a birth certificate, but really there's so many other ways around that.
This is what we talked about at the start of the video, D. Just because the option isn't offered doesn't mean it's not available.
So,
So look
so
for other options.
the only thing I would want to suggest, like you mentioned, the mother getting an affidavit, the other thing would be, I just feel like the state can just be assholes because they won't like the fact that people aren't getting birth certificates, is even for the mother to get as much proof as she can that she had that child, because they might be like, you stole that baby because we have no record of it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if something like that is
That's
thrown.
why you have the affidavit. If you had a midwife or a doula present, get them to write something. If you gave birth in hospital, get the hospital records so that there's a record of that occurring, even if you haven't named the kid yet. There's still a record that you gave birth on this day, date, and time.
Yeah.
And it's evidenced by the hospital administrative records, which they can't refuse when your affidavit attaches all of that as annexes and exhibits.
Yeah.
You know, we gave birth to baby boy named John, who was alive and well, born 3:33 a.m. on the 3rd of January or whatever on 2015. See Annexure B, hospital admission records.
Yeah.
Yep. So you've got it all covered when you do it that way. It's very hard. They cannot refute the testimony and evidence of the mother. Because as a guy, I might say, well, I think the kid's mine, but I don't know. I didn't walk around with in my belly for 9 months. Very different for you women. You can go, well, no, look, this is, and we don't birth. That's you women that do that. I can't say that I birthed the kid. That way I know they're mine without DNA testing and stuff. But for you mums or any women out there,
Yeah.
how can you refute that? You carried them for 9 months and you actually went through the act of childbirth. That's irrefutable evidence. And if you've got it witnessed by anyone, like a partner, nurse, doula, midwife, doctor, whatever, they witnessed that event. You're covered. That story is now corroborated.
Yeah.
It'll be very hard for someone to say, no, I'm calling bullshit. Well, I've got photos of me with the belly growing for 9 months. Here's photos of the birth.
Yeah.
Here's photos of the hospital.
Here's a video of it coming out of me.
Yeah, that's it's very hard to refuse such evidence in the form of an affidavit from the mother. That's called first-hand personal knowledge.
Yeah.
You can't beat that.
I mean, being Australia, we have a lot of different nationalities and people who've migrated from other countries. So a lot of them don't necessarily have an Australian passport. So they'd have other passports from wherever country they're from. And so what I want to ask you is their process of, separating themselves from the system or going into the private or taking control of their legal fiction, is their process similar to ours and what you do?
Look, depending on how they're going about doing it, and sometimes depends on the country or place that they're from.
Okay.
And this is why I like the UCC stuff, because it's recognised by most countries. When you go on the website to file a UCC, we did yours a couple of weeks ago and I showed you, we had every country listed for where's the filing for, from Zimbabwe all the way to Afghanistan. And every country in between in alphabetical order between Afghanistan and Zimbabwe. Nearly every country known is listed for that. So through the UCC, if you're a country that UCC recognises or that recognise uniform commercial codes for our rules of engagement for commerce, yep, we can do it that way via the UCC filings. The affidavits and some of the documents may need to be altered slightly to reflect the local seals, laws, and stuff, as ours is done under Commonwealth seal, which obviously won't work for someone from, say, South Africa or Japan, which is not a Commonwealth nation.
Yeah.
So we've got to factor that in too. So there are some subtle edits, but it depends on what level of anonymity people are looking for. too with that one, because the ID or the passport, remember, where the nature doesn't do borders.
Mm.
So the confines of, if I take 2 steps over here, I'm in Queensland, but 2 steps here, I'm in New South Wales. There's this imaginary line that nature doesn't care for. Yeah, you're on Earth. And this is where the world passports come into play. It says you're a citizen of the planet. You're a citizen of Earth. That you're not beholden to any one country or its laws or anything along those lines. So look, there's a lot of individuality to some of these questions that need to be taken into context with responding to something like that, Dee. But look, generally speaking, look, for most of us, no matter whereabouts you live, it's the same. And it's under, I hate using the word understand, it's comprehending where you're from. You need to know where you're from to be able to know where you're going. If you don't know where you're from, how the hell are you going to know where you're going?
Yeah.
It doesn't work, yeah? And to do that, you've got to know who and what you are and your standing. So when that penny drops that you are, in fact, a living man or woman and not a person, and you fully get that, and you know that in here, that makes that process a lot easier, regardless of the laws. But look, some countries have some very backwards laws and are still highly oppressive, even in today's day and age. So if you're from one of those nations or parts of the world, it'd be very good to distance yourself from it, so you can't be dragged back under their thing as a citizen.
Yeah.
That's why we call it citizenship. Yeah. Oh, do you have citizenship? Are you a citizen on board their ship? Well, I don't want to be on their ship. So I don't want to be a citizen because I don't want their citizenship. I don't want to be on board their boat on their rules. You want to do business with me, fellas? You come over here on my boat. We play by my rules. I'm not getting on board yours as a citizen of your ship, hence the word citizenship.
Yeah, and I think a few countries are owned by Washington, D.C. A few of them are owned by the Vatican. Some are owned by London. I think people need to do their own research about their country and the history, where it's been corporatized. Because if you have a birth certificate, there's corporatization going on there.
Yeah, and look, you need to do your homework on your your roots, where you're from, and look into the history of that part of the world to see. Again, we come back to that source of authority, the power or head of power or power or authority to act or to do any of this. Where does that stem back from?
Yeah.
We go back to the cause, the root, the source, and we work from there.
And you have helped people from other countries, like that's something you can assist others with?
Yes, it depends on what the matter is, though. Like, my knowledge of law across every country is not as good as it is for Australian or Commonwealth law. But there are certain international laws around trade, commerce, contracts, equity, etc., which are pretty much universal. They really don't change. It's just a matter of looking up the where and how it was codified in legislation in that part of the world to be able to make it enforceable. It's not to say it's not there. And a lot of that's done through international trade treaties, etc., which are trade treaties between the two nations. There are treaties or agreements for trade, commerce, or other whatever between the nations, which will often allow us to bridge that gap to be able to use such things. But it's a matter of doing your homework, and it can be very individualized depending on what nation or country people are from.
And what are your thoughts on dual citizenship? And is there a country that you'd want to become a dual citizen at?
For anyone looking at doing that, if you can get dual citizen and have that, then yes, by all means do so, because you've always got a backup where if one stuffs up, you can go to the other or vice versa. You're hedging your bets. Got 2 bets going. You're betting on Team A and Team B. It doesn't matter who wins, you're covered either way.
As so if one country falls apart, you can just go to the other?
Yeah, we can bugger off and go to the other one because we've got dual citizenship. And if the other one stuffs up, well, we come back. You've got it covered both ways. If you're in a position where you can do dual citizenship, by all means do so. It's extra ID, extra collateral you can claim.
Yeah, cool.
Passports are traded on too, of course, because it's got our all caps name on it. So anything with an all caps name is a commodity it's being traded upon. So if you can do that, by all means. If you're looking you don't have, say, family or blood ties to another nation, it's going to be very difficult to get dual citizenship without a valid reason why you need it. If you're from there or your family's from the other country, then it's a lot easier to do. Otherwise, you're looking at paying very, very large quantities. We're talking anything from a couple of $100,000 in excess of 9 or 10 mil to purchase citizenship, diplomacy status, whatever, from other nations and countries. There are a few Caribbean nations that do this for very sizable donations to their economic development fund or for the acquisition of land to foreigners above a certain price that will qualify you to be able to be deemed as a citizen over there and to be able to get dual citizenship. Or if you're doing a lot of business, you can ramp that up to diplomacy and a diplomatic passport for your dual citizenship as well. But it does require a massive budget as to why people like us haven't done that yet, D, because I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions to spare to go and do that. And this is how the rich do it. They want in on a country, they do a massive donation to the Economic Development Fund, or they acquire land or a business there above a certain amount, and they get their dual citizenship or their diplomatic status via that country for their economic donation to the economy of that nation.
It's amazing what money can get you.
Spend enough, you can literally purchase any of this stuff, but it does get expensive. I've had a good look at it. I think the cheaper ones are around 200 grand, and then you can go places like Austria where it'll cost you 9 mil.
Wow.
So yeah, if you can do dual citizenship, by all means, and yeah, it depends on what you're wanting it for as to which country you want to do the other citizenship in. You don't just want to pick one for the sake of having it. You want to have a reason why and have some sort of benefit for having it in that location, whether that because you've got family, business interests, commerce, you can just have a holiday house, whatever it is. You need to have a reason why you want that to be able to have that free travel between the two. And if you are looking at doing that, you want to look at the countries that don't require visas and have really sweet visa deal agreements with the other nations. So if you're traveling, you don't need a visa or whatever if you're just traveling through, because you're on that passport. There's a treaty internationally between that country and the others that you're going to. So again, a bit of homework for people to look at why and how and what they're wanting to achieve out of that as to where they're best off to set that up.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Zev. Do you have any suggestions on how people can protect their property? And what are your thoughts on a private trust being set up for property?
Look, be very careful with the private trust because the laws were changed in the last 12, 18 months, maybe 2 years tops, when there was a big buzz on people registering private trusts everywhere. And the government then changed the law to make it very difficult, almost impossible even in some cases, for a private trust or a private living trust to actually hold real or tangible property under its name, because it wasn't compliant with the statutes of the Land Titles Office, and they couldn't apply certain taxes and capital gains to it under that trust setup. So they weren't liking them. There are a number of trust setups that you can use effectively. You can always do a discretionary or a family or a unit trust for that. You can amend and adjust the deed to make it so it's a very private operating trust. We just don't call it a private trust.
Okay.
It's a bit of, it's the same thing the government does when their departments have issues. They just change the name. We just call it something else. It's still the same thing. We're just going to give it a different name. The discretionary trust, yes, it does have discretionary powers for the trustees to operate at their sole discretion. But it also, because we've edited the deed for some people, it also states that trust is able to operate very privately. In fact, some places more privately than these so-called private trusts that I keep seeing that aren't really private. So we just don't call it a private trust. It's called a discretionary trust, which has the ability to operate very privately. Therefore, we do not call it a private trust. Not to say you can't set them up, but there may be better options for that. And again, this is a very individualized question where there are a lot of individual factors around needs and requirements and as to what they're looking to protect the property. So look, best way, do your homework on your trusts, deal with people who actually know the trust system properly, and the cookie cutter trusts where it's like, oh, here you go, here's our discretionary trust, that'll do everything for you. Here's our private trust that covers it. A lot of the time they don't, because they're a cookie cutter, they're a template. They need to be amended and edited to suit the individual's personal needs or requirements. There may be clauses in those deeds that need to be changed, removed, or edited in order to make that suit. So it's like there's no one size fits all in that sort of arena. And there are a variety of different trusts and setups and ways of doing that. And do you need an account with it, or is it just to hold assets? There's a lot of other questions around that for people. And if you are setting up trust, guys, and you're watching this, talk to people who actually know their shit. Please avoid these idiot spiritual accountants like Abbey Rose and some of the others that are just scamming people and providing very substandard documentation that just doesn't work for people. It's getting them in trouble. So you need to be really, really careful with that. The other good one, if you own your property outright, it's not encumbered by loans or finance or a mortgage, put a lien or a caveat over your own property. And then you need to be paid out first if anyone else is trying to seize it. You've got the original claim. So if you can stick it in a trust and put a lien or a caveat on it, it's a very nice way to do it. If you're rural, you might want to look at taking out some mining, water, logging rights, plane and rights for what can fly over top of you as well. Again, if you pay the government enough, they'll let you do whatever. So you can always offer the government to contract with them for all the rights. So that means no one else can mess with your groundwater. They can't mine your land. They can't log it. And they can't fly whatever overhead because you have the rights to that property.
And putting a lien or caveat, is that an easy thing to do, or do you need to?
But liens are a bit easier to do than a caveat. Again, they changed the laws in the last year or so around caveats. In most parts of Australia now, I can't lodge a caveat like I used to be able to do. It actually requires a lawyer's code. So it must be a qualified lawyer with that code, and they must be lodged digitally in some states now as well. Well, we used to be able to do it via registered post or via mail, and anyone could do a caveat. Now they're changing that where you actually need a lawyer to lodge it for you, and it's got to be done online and digitally.
Okay, good.
Caveats are a bit trickier. They'll cost you a few $100. A commercial lien you can look up online. You can lodge that UCC, PPSR, public notice boards, etc., and send the other party a copy that you've done that if they're doing whatever, as long as you've got that over your own property. A lien or a caveat means you're the first in line as the creditor. Let's say I've put a caveat over your house and you went to sell it. I need to be paid first before you get any money because I've got the first claim. That's why we do them.
You can help people with that, Zev?
Not with the caveats because I'm not a lawyer. I don't have a lawyer's code. Liens and stuff, yeah. And look, Dee, the UCC paperwork we do for people, that UCC1 financial filing statement, that is a lien. That's exactly what that does for people. It's a lien from the living over the straw man.
Because that's a property too.
So it's a commodity. It's a security instrument with value that these bastards are trading on without we, the principal's knowledge or consent, and without paying us any of the dividends. And what they're trading on is our life force living energy, which we're the only ones that hold any equity in that. So we have an equitable right to the dividends of what they're trading off our life force living energy.
You've probably come across so many different methods and approaches to all of this, one of which being quantum grammar, the Postmaster General David Wynne Miller stuff. Do you know much about that? I know a lot of people have invested a lot of money and time in learning about it. Can that be applied? Is it useful? Is it beneficial in any way?
Look, short answer, yes, yes, and yes. Can be applied. It does work and it can be very beneficial, but it does take a long time to learn how to utilize properly and proficiently. You're not going to do a 2-hour video on learning to write quantum parse syntax grammar and learn how to syntax a document, and that's it. You're good to go. There is a whole lot of lawful information required to learn to operate under that field correctly with the appropriate authority as a postmaster. Now, it won't be a postmaster general. It'll be a federal postmaster that you become from doing that, which should involve your live life claim or claim of the live life, to use their language for doing so, and to learn how to write in that quantum grammar, how to syntax documents. This is stuff that takes, it's not a quick, easy thing to learn much about. And there is a little bit of politics in the postmaster world over who's the correct way of doing it. Do we follow David Wynne Miller's work or Russell J. Gould? Now, I'll probably get some nasty comments for this one. Some people aren't fans of either of those two men, and that's all right. We're all entitled to an opinion. My personal views on that is that Russell J. Gould is the correct way or the better way of doing all of that stuff. If you're going to go down the postmaster route, you want to be doing that under Russell's work, because Russell holds the flag treaties. He's got the shipping ports and the commerce from the bankrupt contracts from the Benjamin Franklin Post Office. If people want to look into this, check out on YouTube. You can look up Russell, should say it for Russell's Way, Russell J Gould, and you look up War Castles. And he's got a series of videos on there called War Castles, where Russell goes and explains a lot about this, how he got to be the Commander-in-Chief or World Postmaster General for taking out the Benjamin Franklin Post Office, which is the original shipping port for all commerce in and out of America. So this stemmed back to contracts went bankrupt and were expiring, and there was a couple of weeks window, and Russell J. Gould swooped in and took that over because it was up for grabs in that period of time. And by the time they realised what he'd done, it was too late.
Wow.
So if you're going to go down the postmaster route, yeah, you want to be looking into Russell J. Gould, the War Castles videos to get an explanation. There are some really talented postmasters in Australia who have been doing this for a number of years and are quite good at it too. And it'd be worth speaking to people who have got the experience and the success as a postmaster in dealing with that. But also, having said that too, if you're dealing with the quantum and quantum grammar and passe syntax grammar, etc., and postmastering stuff, you're dealing in the fact and the law. When we're playing with UCC and the courts, that's all fiction and legal. You can't mix the two. So let's say you're a postmaster and you've done your UCC paperwork and you get a fine, for example. You can't apply both to that fine. You've got to choose: do I deal with this as a postmaster, or do I deal with this as the living via my UCC filings?
So it's kind of like, do I play in their arena and play their game, or do I completely just go out of the system and deal with it my own way, type of thing?
Yeah, and again, we can't mix fact and fiction, like we can't mix public and private, living and dead. There are certain things that just don't mix, and this is all part of it. When we mix the two is when things go pear-shaped for people. If you're going to try something new, make sure you've done your homework. You know, you're confident that, yeah, this has got a very high chance of being successful. Or if not, don't go in with the attitude that I have to win. Go in there with the attitude of I'm here to learn, and let's see what happens. And regardless of the outcome, at least you're learning something. If you're learning something, you're still winning, even if you didn't beat it in court. As long as you learnt why and how, that's the trick. I get it now. You've learnt something. I can't pull that on you again, in which case that's still a win. All right, you copped a couple $100 in fines. Who cares? Yeah. You learn. That's a bigger win.
Yeah, that makes me feel a lot better in my early rookie days.
Even now, Dee, if I have to go to court for anything after 25, nearly 30 years of doing this, I still maintain I'm not in there to win or lose. I'm there to learn. I'm there for shits and giggles for my own benefit, to experiment and see wonder if this will. I haven't tried this argument before. Let's see how this goes, you know. Yeah. I could be successful. I could get shot down in flames. I don't care either way. It's not why I'm there. Trick is people focus on the outcome, not the journey. The journey's where you learn.
I remember one of my early cases when I first started learning all of this, and I went into the courtroom, and the magistrate was calling me up, and he called me by my name, and he asked me if that was me, and I said that's the name that I answer to, but I was trying not to contract or agree to that is me, that legal fiction. And he's like, so what do you want me to call you then? And I was kind of like, oh, just call me D. And he's like, that's a bit informal, but I'll call you D. And then he said to me, so what are you, a sovereign citizen or something? And I said, a sovereign and a citizen is two opposing things. It's an oxymoron. I can't be one and the other. I kind of
one at a time.
Yeah. And then he goes, all right. He goes, well, don't you have a license? And I said, well, I'm a holder of a license, but the state owns it. And then he said to me, well, didn't you sign the terms and conditions when you got that license? Like, didn't you agree to the terms and conditions when you got that license? And I said, well, I didn't have full disclosure, and I didn't know what that entailed at the time of signing it. And then he didn't know how to respond to that, and he adjourned the case. And that was proof to me, even though I went there and I spent the whole day pretty much there, wasting a lot of my time waiting around, you know what they do. Yeah. Just having that validation that, him responding in that way and acknowledging oh, but didn't you sign the terms and agreements when I said that I'm the holder? Do you know what I mean?
You didn't sign the terms and conditions, did you? You signed with a fancy pen that has no ink. You signed a digital thingy.
Probably, yeah, I did.
There's no term. All you signed was a little box about yay big that had nothing else attached to it. Remember our four corner rule?
Yeah, that's right.
Four corner rule from our styles manual. Anything enclosed inside four corners is separate and off the page. Now,
Right.
what they ask you to do is to sign digitally with a pen with no ink, mind you, on the digital pad. You didn't sign the terms and conditions at any point. You didn't sign any contract. You put a signature on a digital, whatever they call it, which
Yeah.
was fraudulently copied and pasted onto the license. There's no contract or joinder occurring there. You never signed any official document. You signed a digital pad with nothing attached to it.
See, I wish I knew that at the time. I would have just said that. But yeah, like his responses were actually validating what I was saying. There was some truth to it. And I was like, this is really exciting because you start to see your hard work kind of pay off because they're
Yeah.
throwing like balls at you and you're kind of dodging them, you know what I mean? And so that was pretty cool. And so I understand that it's a learning process and it's not a waste of time or money.
And look, and so sometimes we're dealing with just complete pricks of magistrates and prosecutors who just do not care. The magistrates level of courts has become the wild, wild west where they just don't give a shit. They're like, if you're not happy, appeal it. We don't care. Next.
Yeah.
And if you're dealing with that level of arrogance, it doesn't matter what you say or do. You're going to end up appealing it to a higher level of court. If they're not going to play, they're not going to play.
Yeah.
And, you can threaten them with whatever laws and threaten to arrest them and all the rest of it. They're going to laugh at you and walk away and not give a shit. Yeah, you've got to get that recourse in the higher levels of court where they tend to take this shit a bit more seriously.
Yeah. It's really true. And it really does depend on the magistrate on the day, doesn't it, Zev?
It depends on how you hold yourself with them too.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you go in there looking for a fight, you'll get one. If you're not looking for a fight, well, you're not going to find something you're not looking for, are you?
Mm,
So attitude's a big part of it when dealing with the courts and the authorities too.
yeah. And I also wanted to bring up, I'm finding a lot, especially on social media, whenever I post videos of you and I, or, other things that talk about these sort of subjects and topics, a lot of ignorant people are commenting and writing things like, you're just another sovereign citizen, or, like, oh, here's another sovereign citizen. Like and they don't understand that is the programming that they're being brainwashed with, and that what they're actually saying is not valid. You can't be sovereign and a citizen.
But what they're also saying is that they haven't bothered to research this for themselves.
Exactly.
They haven't bothered to look into it.
It's
Because if they did, you'd have to be blind Freddy to not see what's going on.
mm,
I laugh when I get me haters and trolls online that bag us out. We've had media have done hit pieces on us, and because the media don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, they've run my name of Zev Freeman. And apparently there's a Zev Freeman who's a skydiving instructor and a barrister, to which I'm neither. But in one of the Daily Mail or Guardian or one of the tabloidy ones did a hit piece on a few of us ages ago. They went for all of us in that's dared to speak against the narrative. About half a dozen of us had all got named, and we all had a bit of a giggle about how bad the article was. But I was listed as a skydiving instructor and a barrister, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. I've been skydiving once, which was a tandem jump. And yeah, I'd do it again, D, but I shit myself the whole way down. It's a terrifyingly amazing experience. And yeah, I'd do it again. But I was just, it took me by the time we landed was when it jerried up here. Well, I could never be a skydiving instructor. Yes, I'd go and do another tandem jump with someone who knows what they're doing. It was great. It scared the crap out of me, but it was great. And I'd do it again nonetheless. But this is what the media do. I'm now a skydiving instructor with I don't even think I'd done me jump then when they put out this article. So I never even skydived once, let alone becoming a barrister. They're poorly researched when they do these hit pieces to me. And look, I have a laugh when people are hating on us because I've got better things to do with my time than give someone free rent in my head. And if I'm hating on you, D, it's like me drinking poison hoping that you're getting affected. Because if I'm full of hate toward you, don't care. You're smiling, you're off enjoying your life, you're hanging out with friends and family, doing your thing, and I'm sitting here all wound up and, I'm the one that feels like shit on the inside. I'm all tied up in knots with that horrible negative energy. You don't give a shit. And what happens when I see that you don't care that I'm hating on you? I drink more poison, going, this one will get her. Who's it really affect?
It's so true.
So I let the haters hate and I laugh. I liken it to me squeezing a hot coal, thinking the harder I squeeze it, eventually it's going to burn your hand because I'm pissed off with you. You're having a laugh. Me, I'm the one hurting myself by hanging on to this horrible energy and being full of hate and anger. It's got no effect on you. Let them hate. Let them be angry. It's to their own detriment.
They really get triggered, but I guess that's just the programming that they've created in society about those who don't want to be controlled. Oh, we're bad people. We want to run amok and we want to, break the rules and cause harm to people. It's completely wrong.
You're a heinous criminal, D, you are, for daring to ask questions. It's like, the hell has the world come to when we're deemed as criminals and terrorists for daring to ask a question about something that makes no sense? And then we're deemed anti-vaxxers, tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theorists, sovereign citizens, domestic terrorists, and all these other stupid terms they come up with because we were brave enough to question something. Like when you purchase a car or an expensive appliance or a house, it's generally smiled upon. Hey, that's a smart thing to do, is to investigate that before you purchase it or before you get involved, to ask questions, do your homework. You apply that same rationale and logic to COVID or the jabs, and all these negative connotations come about. Hang on, we're asked to consume a product. You're asked to take something into your body. I don't buy anything at the supermarket without reading the fucking ingredients. So I'll be buggered if I'm letting them put anything else into my body that, I'm picky. Soaps and anything, used externally, if I wouldn't eat it, I don't put it on my body because it's going into you. So, and this is the other thing, people need to be aware of all that. So this is how they do it to us. It's just bombarded from every level, from every avenue for all of that. And, full disclosure, full discovery. What is it we're being offered exactly? Why are we discouraged from asking questions? But I know that's all good because we said so. Just trust us. We're the government. We've got your best interest at heart, and we use words like safe and effective. It's I need some more information. Oh no, you don't need the info, mate. It's all good. It's fine because we said so. We're the media. We're the government. We wouldn't lie to you. Kind of an attitude. Meanwhile, we all know they're full of shit. Why we're asking questions. So always ask questions, question everything. For you guys watching this, question what I've said. Do your homework.
So a hot topic right now, Zev. Digital ID, Directors I.D. What's your take on it all? And what else?
I've got a real simple one to this one for people to do, which I've done this with a friend. We haven't had anything back yet.
All right. Tell us.
You're not getting, look, it's a bit of a cheeky way of dealing with it, but so far we haven't had an issue. The fines that they're threatening directors for is not for not having a director's ID. It's for not applying for one. Fuck the application up on purpose. With the application in a way that they are not going to accept it. Everyone likes to make this convoluted. We're looking up research and checking legislation and constitution and laws and trade treaties and all this other stuff. Hang on. The fine that they're threatening people is for not applying. And if they do try and threaten you with a fine for not having one, it's like, mate, I've sent 4 frigging applications and you bastards keep knocking them back. And now you want to do me with a fine for not having one. I'm trying here. What do you want from me?
That is so smart. I love that.
It's a very, very simple way of dealing with the director's ID. Put information on there that's not relevant. Fill out the wrong boxes. You can just write NA on the sections. No, this field must be completed, but I don't want to complete that field. Put NA. Edit the form. Change the stuff where it says down the bottom of the director's ID application that it's all right for them to share the info with third parties. No, I explicitly do not consent to any of my information being shared with third parties. Cross stuff out, rewrite it on the form. They go, mate, we're not accepting this. It looks like a 3-year-old scribbled all over it. Mate, that's my application. Did it go through or not? No, you're going to have to submit another one. All right, then.
Wherever there's person, living man, living
Yeah,
man.
and all that sort of stuff. Just change all of that on the form. Put NA in the spots you don't want to fill out or give them the info for. If you were going to do the application, you want it to go through in a way where you know damn well it's not going to get approved. They can't find you then because, well, no, mate, you haven't applied. Oh, mate, I've done 3 applications. What are you talking about? You mongrels keep sending them back. You just can't find me for that. That's a simple one.
I like that. You're very witty with that stuff, aren't you, Zev? Finding little loopholes and cracks in their words.
Removed from it. They've got this thing in this little tiny box. You know, it's this little box they want. I'm 5 kilometres over here somewhere. I'm not operating anywhere near their friggin' box. And then we look at it from a different angle to see how can we, negate that, get around it, mitigate it, not participate.
Yeah.
Oh, we can't get around participating. Okay, we're just going to participate very poorly so that it will not be approved or granted. Problem solved. Again, just because the option hasn't been offered doesn't mean it's not available.
Yeah.
And this is a massive thing to remember when dealing with the purported authorities and the law agents and the rest of it there. No, mate, you've got to choose options A or B. Well, we haven't even discussed options C or D. What about options X, Y, and Z? We're not offering that. Yeah, but I can see them. Like the options are there.
That's awesome. Thank you, Zev, for sharing that one. Another one I get asked a lot is about tax. How legitimate is the ATO? Do we have to do tax returns? All that stuff. What do you have to say about that?
Look, first of all, most people watching this with us talking on here, they're going to be aware that the ATO was never legally gazetted as a legal entity at its inception in 1973. There's been extensive FOI requests and archive records being pulled by many people over the years who have proven that is the case. People also might want to look up the High Court case of Mollica versus Chapman, where this is referenced as well, done the early 2000s. Now, for me, the ATO, look, setting up your business structures better with private associations, trust, etc. You will need the help of a solid accountant, someone who knows this world to help you do that to wouldn't say avoid your taxes because we might control it, but to minimise the tax that you're paying. We can't avoid them because I go to the shop and buy a pack of smokes and paying tax. I buy beer and paying tax. I buy a bottle of whiskey and paying tax. I buy bread and milk, I pay tax. I fart in public, I pay tax. It doesn't matter what we do nowadays. There's a tax for it. Yeah. On already taxed money, which is illegal. They're not allowed to tax it more than once. For any interaction you do, you purchase anything, GST. You get a tradie out, they charge you GST. Go to the mechanic, you're paying GST on the parts and on their labour. We're paying tax everywhere anyway, which is bloody hard to avoid. But we can minimise the tax we pay on what we earn by not classifying it as earnings or income. It could be sustenance or outcome. Earnings are an outcome of your labour, not an income. That's one easy one. Now, the other point to bring out with the ATO is bring it back to a matter of equity because the laws of equity are absolute. They're very, very hard to deal with. So when we're doing this sort of stuff, let's say I've come to your house for you, D, and you've wanted me to build you a brick fence out the front of your joint, yeah? Now, what I earn or the outcome rather than income or the payment is received in the form of sustenance. It's not earnings, it's not income, it's not wages. It's not pay. It's sustenance used to sustain life, which as a living man, I kind of need. So you might do that in the form of sustenance. Funnily enough, too, the word sustenance doesn't exist in tax legislation. Simple way there. Now, the product of my labour is this brick fence, which now has value that I've created with my life force living energy I've used to build this brick fence to the value of, let's say it was a $10,000 job, for example, D. And then you're going to pay me 10 grand for this brick fence in the form of sustenance. Now, if the ATO were to say to me, mate, you've got to pay tax on that job, you earned 10K on that. You didn't earn anything. That was sustenance. And how do you have an equitable claim over the product of my labour to which my life force living energy was used to create? Are you putting in an equitable claim over my life force living energy? Because if you are, you're claiming to be a slave master or a slaveholder. The only thing that could possibly have an equitable claim over my life force living energy would be God or nature.
Mm.
I haven't received a claim from them claiming equity over my life force living energy, which otherwise means I hold the equity to that. And then anything produced from that equity also belongs to me, not to the ATO. So if it's my life force living energy I use to build a brick fence in order to have sustenance provided in the form of, say, $10,000, the ATO has no equity or equitable claim in that scenario because they have no equity over my life force living energy used to create the labour to earn a product of labour. Remember, it's only the living that can produce or create. The dead don't produce or create a lot other than fertiliser. Yep, so there's no value. But we as the living can create and produce, which is what gives value and credit to what it is we do as the living.
Yes.
And this is our equity, is that life force living energy that no one else can. I can't make an equitable claim over your life force living energy and then claim you've got to pay me for the products of your labour that you used your own life force living energy to create or produce.
Yeah.
I'd be claiming slaveholder or slave master rights then. Last time I checked, that shit was highly illegal. Ask, is that what you're claiming? Provide the proof, provide with the ATO, provide the contract, the evidence of when and where they are ever legally gazetted as a legal entity, with details provided as to when and where that was gazetted in the government gazette.
Mm.
Ask them, which tier of government are you purporting to belong to or operate under, the executive, legislative, or the judiciary? Where do they derive their source of authority from?
Mm.
And how does your authority get applied over or onto me?
Mm.
Are you denying the authority we have? The same argument as before. No, I'm not denying whatever authority you're claiming to have, mate. I'm denying it has any effect over me, though, without my consent. We've got a maxim of law that says a labourer is worthy of his hire. If you've been hired to do something, the labourer is worthy of that fee. It doesn't include taxes or anything else there.
Mm.
Comes back to a matter of equity for me. That's my short way of explaining that with the ATO. There's no contract, there's no power of attorney deed, there's no equity. I don't have a claim. I can't say, oh, we're the ATO, you owe me money. It's like saying to them, I'm the XYZ, you owe me money. They'd laugh at us. Why are we not doing the same to them? Provide proof of claim. Oh, mate, you have to pay your taxes to help run the country. Well, I do not want to support this current corrupt government. And our so-called tax money, look at the state of our roads, our schools, and our hospitals, for example. They're in absolute disarray. Meanwhile, the politicians are giving themselves pay rises off our fucking tax money. And then they've got the hide to turn around and tell us all, yeah, the world's fucked, we know that. But if you pay us all more taxes, we'll fix that which we messed up. I mean, when we put it like that, it's laughable, but is that not what they're doing, Dee?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, we know we stuffed up for the last 200 and something years here. We keep making errors, but if you pay us more taxes, we'll fix that we cocked up.
Mm. And, funding wars overseas with their own agendas too,
We've sent how many millions of dollars to Ukraine while we've got schools, roads, and hospitals in disarray, a homeless problem here with housing and everything else.
Mm.
We're going to send millions of dollars to support a so-called war that we shouldn't have any part in on the other side of the world anyway, but we can't afford to look out for our own people here. We have no budget to fix that. And meanwhile, the politicians are getting pay rises. So more of the tax money from the Australian people is lining their pockets, not going to do its intended purpose. If it was, we'd have decent roads, we'd have better schools, we'd have a better health system and stuff as well. But we don't, because the politicians just keep giving themselves pay rises with all of our tax money.
Mm. It's a joke. It really frustrates me, and I often think about what we can do as a collective to stop this from happening. Like, is there something we can do, come together to break this down and put a system together, like a common law system where, the people are in charge?
We have the systems in play, Dee, but sadly, as you're well aware, with all of our, mob and movement here,
Yeah.
too many egos and politics. No, my way is the one true. It's almost like a religious argument. Well, mine's the one true religion, and you guys have got it all wrong. No, we've got to do it my way because you're all wrong. How about we do every way? And we don't look at right or wrong. We just look at the theory of 1,000 bullets from 1,000 directions. They can't block all of them. So whatever your tactic or techniques or methods are, if they're working, keep doing it. Share that with others. When they get hit with 1,000 attacks from 1,000 directions, And I'm talking paperwork, not actual bullets here, just to clarify for the haters and trolls watching, yeah? The challenges to their narrative.
Yeah.
These are our bullets, our attacks, so to speak, and done peacefully as well. I'm not here to encourage violence or anything along them lines, but it can be done peacefully. It's a case where the pen can be mightier than the sword. And when you have these 1,000 challenges or attacks from 1,000 directions, they cannot block and parry all of them. They just can't. So keep at them, keep the pressure on, keep challenging them, keep asking them to provide proof that we all know they don't have. And hit them with lines as much as we can from every angle, even if it doesn't work. It's a nice smoke screen for those of us who've got stuff that does work while they're busy dealing with the bullshit over here for our scammers like Derek Ballog and the likes. Yeah, while they're focusing on that crap, we can get in behind them and hit them with the real stuff.
I can see that what we're doing is having an effect, because you look at the things that they've been putting in the media lately, and it's about, don't listen to all these conspiracies, and this man got his car impounded because he was trying the sovereign citizen argument. Like, they've been putting quite a lot of content about these sort of things up lately, and the fact that they're trying to create some sort of a fear around it or brainwash people to not believe any of it, to me, it's showing that they're really afraid now, because it's growing and a lot is happening behind the scenes.
The other big bonus we have with the media doing that, over the last 3-4 years through COVID, a lot of people who were asleep are now wide awake. And their faith and trust in pharma, the medical facilities and industry, media and the government is at an all-time record low. Where it's got to the point now where most people I know, if the media says it's black, then we all go, oh, it must be white. If the government says it's white, then we know it must be black, and we work backwards from there. And because they've lost such trust in the community that they used to have a bit of sway with, oh yeah, it's the news. It's not news anymore. It's advertising and propaganda. I mean, half the shit that's on the news doesn't even qualify as news. So we've got that at play as well. So if the media are doing this, it's because they're afraid. It's a countermeasure that they're trying to employ. And because of that, and people have seen how full of shit these guys are, how far gone and how much we cannot trust the media and big pharma and the government anymore, they've overplayed their hand over the COVID times to show people that they cannot be trusted. And they've proven it. They've done it to themselves. A lot of us have helped by going, hey, did you guys see that? And pointing it out for people, but people are waking up in their droves and able to see that for themselves. So as they're trusting the media and the government and big pharma and the likes less and less, the more they're saying don't do this, the more people are doing it. They say do this, everyone goes, no, I'm not doing it because you guys said to. We're going to do the opposite.
They've learnt. Thank God.
So yeah, it's free advertising for those of us who get it. When they're doing all this, oh, don't do this, the sovereign citizen got caught and had his car impounded or whatever. For people who are actually curious about this, they'd look that stuff up and do their research rather than just take it at face value. And anyone who bothers to look into it for more than 30 seconds is going to see, hang on, no, he actually had a good point. That's not a bullshit sovereign citizen argument. That's a valid, lawful, bloody fact. And he was right.
Private Members Association, is it worth joining one? Or are there benefits for it from moving from the public to the private?
Look, there are and there can be. The trouble is, in Australia, we don't really have any particular laws that recognise or govern a PMA here in Australia, which is a bit of a double-edged sword. One, there's nothing there that can govern one because from my research, I haven't found any legislation that specifically refers to a PMA in order for any statutes to have any governance over one. But at the same time, it also means that they are not a recognised entity by our government either. So you need to be very careful in the way they're written. And look, again, because I'm dropping names on this and things tonight, this idiot spiritual accountant, Abby Rose, that's selling these crappy PMAs for $5 or $6 grand is just an absolute rot. They're ineffective. The language is terrible, and they don't do what a PMA is supposed to do. If you're looking at being a part of a PMA, do your homework on that first. These originate from the States. It's Marbury versus Madsen or Madison, was the case they use in America. That so do your homework on this, guys, and learn where this comes from. It may pay to register a PMA in another country and umbrella your shit here under it in order to have that set up where it is recognised by any sort of formal law. Again, it's a double-edged sword here at the moment in Australia, and you're really rolling the dice on PMAs. Yes, there are some great benefits you can get under a PMA being a private member. Apparently, there's a bar, a pub down here in Melbourne that set himself up as a PMA and doesn't have any liquor licensing or RSAs with any of the state government. So I'm under my PMA, I'm allowed to sell alcohol to my private members. It's a private transaction. It's not public. So that's where that comes into play to be able to do that. But you can't just do, oh, I'm a member of a PMA, so I can do whatever I like and no laws apply to me. We still have the issue of honour and integrity. We still have the matter of cause no harm, loss, damage, or injury. Our basics of our common law. You know, that still needs to be adhered to. A lot of people see this as a get out of jail free card. And getting into it for those reasons, guys, then you're doing this for the wrong reasons. The idea is to remain a good and honourable individual at all times with integrity and not to cause harm, loss, damage, or injury. Yes, none of us want the overreach and oversight of the government to infringe upon our daily lives, our rights, freedoms, liberties, and happiness, which they have no right to impose upon. But if you're doing PMAs, be very, very, very careful. I'm hoping I've got one ready in the next couple of weeks for everybody that is actually done properly. I haven't seen really any decent ones in Australia yet that I'd be happy to use. That's why I've been writing my own one up for the last however long, because they're tricky to do properly. And there are certain guidelines. Look, people who do your homework, guys, if you're looking and just want to create your own and do this, the American basis for that is where they come from, because there are laws and Supreme Court cases like the Marbury-Madsen or Madison. I can't remember the exact year and what else in that case number, but that's what sanctions them over in the States. So start there. Look at the origins, the source of where they come from. Don't get one from some Aussie that's been on the scene for all of a year or two, reckons they know what they're doing because they're a spiritual accountant. They're not spiritual or an accountant, and they're bloody clueless looking at what they do. And they're charging like $6,000 or more for these.
Yeah, wow.
People are going to rely on that in a matter of court. Without doing your due diligence and homework, you're going to get yourself in trouble. And this is what people like you and I are trying to help people avoid these, to keep them out of trouble, not put them deeper in. So, guys, be careful. Yeah, the PMAs, when written properly, can create a whole host of benefits for you as to what you can do and provide and or sell to your private members in the private without the public oversight of public government. Yes, but it needs to be done properly and correctly. And again, the cookie cutter templates for a PMA may not work for your individual needs or requirements. So it may need to be edited to factor that in. What are you intending to do with the PMA?
Okay. It'll be good to see what you do.
It'd be good, if people to have a specific clause. If you want to do like this, I think I called the Black Hat Bar or something down here. I'll have to double check that. So don't quote me on this one yet, Dean. People watching, I need to confirm the name of the venue. They've done that, and they're serving alcohol to their private members because their PMA says that they can. But you need to be writing yourself in the PMA outside of the government overreach. So you can't be referring to statutes or taxes or any of that stuff in there, or you put yourself back in to the very thing you're trying to write yourself out of. Big benefits that can come from that and from being a member of a properly set up PMA. Just be really careful playing with that, guys. Again, it's a double-edged sword, as there's no laws that recognise it as an entity, so to speak, in Australia. But having said that, there's also no laws that are set up to govern one either.
Are you able to help people if they want to venture into that?
In a couple of weeks' time, yes.
Okay. You mentioned that lady, the spiritual accountant, and
Abby Rose, yeah, she's a scammer. Her and Derek Ballog are two of the worst in this industry.
Yeah, since our last chat, you mentioned Derek Barlog. I've had quite a few people reach out to me, message me, and even just conversations of people sharing their stories where they've put their trust and faith into someone who's claiming to know all this information and knowledge and going to help them with the situation. And what ends up happening is that they end up having like costs or court orders made against them And you mentioned earlier that you've had people come to you in these situations where you've had to help them.
Let's start with Derek Ballog, the man, to most of us who have been in this industry for quite some time, he's a known con man to a lot of us. So anyone watching this who's doing any work with Derek Ballog, avoid him. Stop working with him. Stop giving that lying, thieving prick your money. He's not going to help you. He's going to take your money. Sounds great, and it all looks nice on the surface, but his language and wording and comprehension of the law is terrible. He's just done a video in the last week saying how he's arrested and charged a magistrate and sheriffs and bailiffs, which is hilarious. Telling someone you're under arrest and or you're going to be charged versus actually arresting them or charging them are two very different things. Oh, I'm going to say, all right, D, I'm placing you under arrest and I'm charging you with fraud and treason. I'm now going to go and make a video and tell everybody I've just arrested D and charged her. I've done no such thing. All I've said is that you're under arrest. I haven't actually arrested you. I haven't charged you with anything. I've said I'm going to. Told you you're charged. You're arrested. Whoopee. Nothing happens. Derek and all of his cronies and followers were thrown out of the court. The magistrate left, came back and sat down, and they kept carrying on business as usual. No one got bloody arrested. Derek keeps going on about, I've got all the paperwork and documents to prove it. He may as well have toilet paper because that man over the years that we've all seen him doing this shit has got nothing. And if he wants to come at me for, for calling him out for being the con man and the fraudster he is, I welcome it. I'd be happy to call him out publicly and show everyone what a scam he is. Abby Rose as well, she's another one. Jenny Minnis that used to work with Derek. She's got a website dedicated to it that someone else built called Jenny is a Scam that outlines all the bullshit these guys have done to people. So look, be really, really careful where you're getting your info from, guys. Check them around, look them up, see if there's stuff against them. Ask around in the law in this, in the law community with those of us who've been in here for a while. Speak to some of us who've been around for a while. We'll tell you who the good ones are. Sadly, there's not a lot of us left. But too many people rot in the system and just conning others. Now, having said that, there are some, and I won't go into some of the other names here because I don't know what they're like yet, D. There are some people who I'm not sure if they honestly believe they're trying to help people and they just don't get it. And they're charging money for their time or services for shit they haven't tested or don't know if it works, but they believe they're actually helping and doing a good thing. Look, guys, lift your game. But I'm not going to call out the names of some of these people who are doing that because I honestly don't know if they're doing it purely for the money like Derek does and Abby Rose, or if they generally believe they're actually helping people. Their information's a bit off. If the heart's in the right place, yeah, I feel for them because they're not quite there yet to do it. But if you're a Derek Ballog or an Abby Rose and you're out there just rorting people purely for the money, no, you need to be taken out publicly and called out for the damage you've done and provide the remedy. People with Derek's stuff with his houses and mortgages, people lost their properties and all of their assets. They were put into bankruptcy and receivership. He led them down the garden path, and when they really needed him, he wasn't contactable. And then he moved from doing mortgages to teaching people common law. Then he was teaching people quantum grammar and postmaster stuff. Now he's trying to do private criminal prosecutions and treason, which is hilarious. He's jumped from one ship to the next because every time he does something new, the people work out that he's full of shit and he's a con man. So he starts something else up. He's one of the worst that we have in Australia for this sort of shit.
I'm just thinking, could he be controlled?
I think he's just a lying sack of shit, is my view, and a con man who enjoys fleecing people for money. He puts on a brave front and a good show, but that's all it is. Yeah, there are good people out there, D. There's people like us. We've got some very good, talented people out there who are making a big difference. We've got people like Darren Dixon, who's a walking encyclopedia, runs the Constitution Watch website. Some great info and resources on there. And he's literally, that man's a walking encyclopedia and actually a good bloke. And we've got the two Desies up at the far north Queensland, the Anti-Corruption Academy. The work they're doing is sensational stuff, and it works. It's proper. Mate Tom Barnett is another one of the good ones. Hell of a nice guy and really, really switched on. And Tom doesn't focus a lot on the law stuff nowadays, D, but the mindset is, and the health and aspect that Tom helps people to achieve, that's paramount for doing this work. If you've got the wrong attitude, the wrong mindset, I don't care how good your knowledge of the law is, it will not work. So there are some really good people out there that are actually generally helping people to do all this sort of stuff, guys. Ask around to find out who the good ones are. Those of us that have been doing this for a really long time and are still there versus these, ones that have popped up during COVID because they woke up when COVID hit. You've got to look at how much experience have they actually had. Where did they learn this stuff from? The rest of us have been at this for 20 plus years and we've tried and tested it ourselves. It's a very, very big difference.
It's really important that the people that we are following or learning off have experience, have applied it in their life, and have good intentions, good morals, and integrity.
You've got to remain honest, especially in this game, D. It's been 3 years or so I've been doing this for exchanging my time for services provided and all for sustenance and the rest of it because it just needed to be done. I mean, I've been doing this for a very long time, but it became I was helping that many people. I needed to earn some sustenance or I was going to go back to doing a regular job and doing this as a hobby. And there was too much of a demand for me to do that. But I've got the runs on the board and I can prove it. So if you're working with anyone who claims, first of all, if you meet anyone who claims to be an expert, run. Experts are people who are finished learning. That's why they call themselves an expert, because they can't be taught, they can't be told, because they're the expert. The rest of us are still learning.
Red flag.
Yeah. If anyone says, I'm the expert, walk away. Anyone calling themselves an expert has finished learning. That's why they call themselves an expert.
So I've just done my UCC through you guys, Zev, and I just want to bring up something really important that I feel like we should address. And with that UCC, you guys send out an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. Can you talk about that and why you have that?
We send them out for everyone for a simple reason. I've known it's been going on for a while, but in recent months, it's become a little bit more prolific. And as a result of it becoming more and more prolific with what's going on, people have used some of my paperwork, my documentation, my processing, which is my own IP that I've learnt and developed over a 25-year-odd period in this space. And then people have taken that IP of mine, bastardized it, edited it, copied it, watered it down, changed the wording, changed the title of the document, and then they've on-sold that information to someone else for their own personal profit and profiteering. Yet what they've changed is watered it down and made it so incorrect that it's no longer effective. Like the stuff that we've done, I've tested, I've proven it works. Affidavit pack's a good example. I've knocked out a $70,000 stamp duty claim with Revenue New South Wales using those very documents. I know damn well they work when done properly and with proper education, training and guidance. People are doing these, getting these documents or purchasing them from us, and then they're on-selling them after a couple of minor edits or changes as their own work with very bad advice to people as to how to utilize the documents, what they're called, the titles, serving, processing and everything. They've attempted to reinvent the wheel without the years of experience. And the people they've sold this advice and documents to, which weren't theirs to sell, hasn't gone well for them in court. I've got a few clients who have come to me with my own documents that they've served through other people who have sold them my handiwork or advice on how to use it. And they've been absolutely shafted by the courts because it's incorrect. And of course, it hasn't worked. And then I've got to go back after the fact and fix it at the client's expense. So you can imagine some of these clients aren't too happy with these other people they've gone to who have ripped off my work, on-sold it, profited off it, given bad advice while pocketing the money. And then the client's left deeper into shit instead of being helped. And then they've got to come back to me, the author, the source of the documents, to have me attempt to fix it, which is a lot harder to do after the fact. Contest is always better than protest.
For sure.
We contest it before it happens. Protesting it after the fact is a lot more difficult. And there's been a number of them coming through, and I've looked at their paperwork and I've recognized it straight away. That's my handiwork. There are certain phrases and terms that is a unique form of the language that I've applied to my own documents once, so I recognize my own handiwork with the wording. But that's my way of doing it. So I recognize my own little patterns of words and phrases that are unique to me. I haven't seen anywhere else. So when that comes back to me, I ask my clients, it's, look, paperwork's not bad, but it looks kind of like my work, but it's been chopped and changed and edited and crossed and messed with. Where'd you get it from? And they go, I was asked not to tell you, but I got this from, and then they come clean and go, right, well, you need to let them know that they've cocked this right royally. And had they left it alone, might have worked. And the lesson here is go to the author.
Yeah.
Whatever it is you're doing, whether it be common law, admiralty, constitutional, UCC, Commonwealth custodians or nationals, go to the author. Stop trying to cheap out by getting third and fourth hand information from people who don't really get it, who didn't create the documents. They don't know. And they're giving people bum advice on doing so. They're cashing in on other people's hard work and years of learning. It's not right. There's no honour and there's no integrity in that. And there's a couple of them which I hope are watching this that are doing exactly that to me. And like, you know, some of these people, Dee, and up until recently, I'd even call them a friend. But when they received a copy of my NDA, they spat it right royally. Now, the only ones that have complained and arced up about the NDA are those that are on selling my work. No one else has had an issue with it. Funny how that works. So the NDA was a non-disclosure agreement, one, to protect my IP, but two, to protect my clients from having this work used elsewhere, and then people getting shitty advice based on my 25 years plus of knowledge and learning and experience and IP that I've spent that long to create a lot of these documents. I've spent months typing some of these paperwork and documents up. The UCC stuff we're done with you, Dee, I rewrote all those documents myself. It took me 6 months. That is, and the UCC process that I've adopted is a very unique one. So when I see that being replicated by others, I know damn well where it come from. And the wording I've put in those documents is unique to me because I changed them all. I had a half a dozen copies of the UCC paperwork I'd found floating around online from various sources, and I wasn't happy with any of it. I took the best of each of them and then rewrote them and corrected a lot of the language in them too, because it had to be done. A lot of the language is 20, 30 years old. We've learnt better nowadays. So if we've learnt and know better, why aren't we making it better?
Yeah.
People don't have the knowledge to do that themselves, so they cash in on people like myself who have done it. Look, if anyone's watching who's got one of my NDAs, guys, it doesn't prohibit you from using the documents for your own use or for your own profit for legal purposes to help you out of the shit you're in. What it does stop you from doing is selling my IP to others for your own profit. If people want those documents and want to learn how to use them, you send them to the author. Now, whether that's my handiwork or someone else's does not matter. It's the honourable way to go about doing things. Stop profiting off other people's work. And if people want to have questions, you send them, I got this from Des, I got this from John. This is one of Jeff's things. Send them to the author. It's to protect my IP and my clients.
And it maintains the validity and the effectiveness of that document.
There are many years of learning and experience that gone into learning how to do a lot of this, and then to have it ruined like that. And there's a couple of them that I'm a bit upset with because, I thought they were a friend, and friends don't behave like that.
People have been trying to file affidavits into courts, and they're kind of dodging that and not accepting them. Is there something somewhere around that?
Registered post.
It's
a great way of doing it because it's there. The open envelope, it's on file. Go and ask them to stamp it as received. It depends on what sort of affidavits. If you're doing affidavit of truth and affidavit of freedom with your own personal seals and silly logos all over it, they're going to knock that shit back. If you have on the top page your affidavit, their affidavit sheet, and your affidavit under or attached to, you'll sneak it in that way. If the magistrate's having issues with it, lodge it higher up. Lodge it with the governor or the attorney general of the state. Lodge it with the chief magistrate's office for your matter. Go above them. Put it in there as an evidence. Have your affidavit attached to their affidavit, for example. So you use one of their affidavit forms. If it's one of ours, we'll accept that. And then it doesn't say much on there other than see the attachments. Attachment A, there's our affidavit. We've stuck it in there. So there's numerous ways. Quite often for a criminal matter, they'll say we don't use affidavits. It's only for civil. Well, then why are you accepting a statement of facts from the police that's not even sworn as evidence? And I can't put a sworn verified document in for my evidence.
There you go.
There are ways of getting around that one, and we don't need an affidavit for every matter. They are advisable because an unrebutted affidavit stands in truth, remains fact in law. Great way of getting stuff over the line. But you need to be careful as to in what aspect that you're lodging and filing those. They have a very hard time refusing an affidavit, and they must state the reason, grounds, and or law or legislative instrument they're relying upon that allows them to refuse you tabling evidence in your defence. If you can't table a defence, then you're being denied access to natural justice, which they're also not allowed to do. So that's a quick one on the affidavits, getting them through into the court.
Thanks, Zev. Last one. Is there a way to protect your bank account if they are taking money out of it for unpaid fines and stuff like that?
Yes and no. Look, it really depends on where you're at with that one. That's a very much a individual circumstances question. Depends on what sort of deal you've got with the bank. Have you got the bank on notice for what to do with your account? Have you got bank garnishee notices filed with the bank or the bank manager? Again, contest is better than protest. So that's a tricky one to answer there, because if it's already happened, it's very, very difficult to do much about it. To prevent that from happening, you need to deal with the fine and stop ignoring them, because that only happens when you ignore it and do not respond and correspond with them. Correspondence can draw it out for a very long time to get you beyond that 12-month period for a traffic fine, for example, so you're outside of the statute of limitations. Don't ignore it. Don't put your head in the sand. And look, on that note too, D, a lot of people come and say, we really need your help. It's urgent. All right, we need to see you straight away. I'm in court next Tuesday. I've got Paul Cherie trying to juggle the diary to squeeze them in. We can't help people learn what they need to know to run a court matter in 3 days. It takes time to learn this stuff. And if you leave it to the last minute, where you've got your head in the sand, and 3 days before court, you're contacting people like myself for help, we can't help you in that time frame. It's taken 25 years. I'm still learning.
I get people ring me the day before their court. Can you quickly help me? No, because it's very last minute.
And well, what about the information? Oh, this is my 4th appearance. Well, can you send me the documentation from the previous? I don't have it. Well, how am I supposed to help you if I don't know? If you don't know what's gone on, how do we get to this point? It becomes a mess. Look, the big lessons here, guys, don't ignore shit when they send it to you. Respond. You don't have to respond in the way they want you to respond. Again, you must respond with Form A or Form B. I'm going to send them Form X or Form Z. A response is still a response. You must respond with the following information. No, you don't. You must respond. So respond. We don't have to respond in the way they want. You can just do a thing that says notice of response. This is my response to your correspondence. Before this goes any further, you start asking questions. You've responded. Not in the way they want you to, but it's still a response. Again, create the other options, guys. And look, question everything. Anything you've seen us talk about tonight, guys, do your homework, question it, research it. Regardless of the source, question everything, and don't bury your head in the sand and leave shit to the last minute. They're 2 really big points here. Get on top of your stuff, be organised, deal with it in due time, course, and manner, where it doesn't get to the point where you're freaking out because I've been ignoring this for 18 months and now they're going to cancel my license and my rego, and they're going to start taking money out of my bank, and I've got sheriffs after me. It's because you've been ignoring this shit for the last couple of years and not dealing with it. So deal with it in a timely fashion. It won't get to that point.
Good advice. Wise words from Zev Freeman. Thank you so much for your time. I've kept you here for so long. I'm so sorry.
So it's a bit of a longer one tonight, but look, we had a lot to cover. Hopefully people will get some more info out of doing these chats with you, D, and it'll start to show people there are other options. I keep saying it. There's always more options. Just because they're not being offered doesn't mean they're not available.
Yeah, that's a takeaway message for tonight.